Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The cultural dialogue between Egypt and Russia arguably dates back to before the 20th century. 19th century writers Leo Tolstoy and Alexander Pushkin borrowed from Arab literary canon, and specifically the 1001 Nights in their work. Many of the major contributions to the Egyptian cinema and theater studied in Russia or were deeply influenced by Russian mentors in ballet and painting. A similar connection is also clear. In order to know more about Egyptian-Russian literary relations, we're very much honored to have with us Mr. Ahmed Salah Eddin, translator and writer. Always a pleasure having you with us. Thank you very much for being with us.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. So it is a touching subject, and when Hala was reading the her introduction, I just remembered also that a lot of classical music was portrayed in our movies. Russian
Yes.
classical music, perhaps, especially Tchaikovsky's.
Rimsky-Korsakov, Shahrazad,
Yes. So,
most of the time.
how did Arabic and Russian literature affect each other? They must have affected each other a lot.
Yes, actually, there's a common misconception about the beginning of the relationship between the Arab East, Arabian East, and Russia. It dates back actually to the 10th century, when one of the travelers, the Russian travelers, came to the East, the Arabian East, and visited so many countries. His name is Daniel, Igumen Daniel, and this one went back to Russia and published his book. It was the first book published about the Arabian countries, and it was actually hailed and welcomed by the Russian readers. They loved it so much. And as Hala just mentioned in the introduction, thank you very much for this information about the influence of Arabian Nights on Russian literature. Lev Tolstoy, this is his name in Russia, in Russian, and it's in English it's Leo Tolstoy. So he's the right pronunciation is Lev Tolstoy.
Okay.
Lev Tolstoy borrowed some stories from Arabian Nights and adapted them to the Russian language and rewrote them with different setting, different names of characters, things like that. He loved it so much, and he was fascinated by the way it was written. You know, the Arabian Nights was written in the frame narrative methodology of writing, and he was influenced by it. And they said that many artists, painters, many musicians were influenced by Arab culture.
Okay.
And then, you know, there's a give and take relationship between cultures. The Russians absorbed the beauty of the Arab culture from Arabian sources, and then they reproduced their own art. And you know, the Arabian Nights, it's well known by background music made by Rimsky-Korsakov, the Russian. Shahrazad, this music is made by a Russian composer. It's not Arabic. Sometimes people think that it's Arabic. It's not Arabic, it's Russian.
Okay. Mr. Ahmed Salah Eddin, what are the preparations for the 2020 Egyptian-Russian Year of Culture?
Actually, the Russian Center and the Association of Graduates of Russian and Soviet universities and the Ministry of Culture in Egypt and in Russia and different Russian institutions, we made some consultations last year and made so many meetings to prepare for this year. You know, the two countries are great countries. They have great cultures, they have great history, and there is a lot of mutual things between the two countries. So it has to be well prepared. So the celebrations will be focused on different fronts, mainly art and culture and education, science, economics, so different fronts. There will be some kind of uh, Russian artists and writers will be coming from Russia, and Egyptians will be going there, making some kind of festivals, um, seminars for Arabic literature or Egyptian literature, and there will be a conference in April, the Supreme Council here in Egypt. It's focused on literature, translation, and how we would promote translation from Russian into Arabic and vice versa to enable readers in each countries to know each other better. Actually, there is a very serious problem about the stereotypes. You know, both sides suffer from stereotypes. We have stereotypes about Russians, and Russians have stereotypes about us. We need to make a true to life perceptions about each country in the here and the now, not with the influence of media or other sources or even other real life minimal incidents that happen and influence the perception or the impression about Egypt, for instance, in resorts or something like that. Besides, there will be lots of books, either literary, scientific, economic, philosophical, will be introduced in this year, and there will be enlargement of the number of students that go to Russia to study, and number of visiting students to Egypt, and so many other things.
So, Mr. Ahmed, what are the fields of books that are usually translated in both languages? I mean, Arabic and Russian.
Actually,
The fields of the books.
when um, translation was managed by governmental institutions, the scope was wider because there was no fear about the sales. But now, um, most of the translations are made by private sector publishing houses or private publishing houses. So the focus on the sale is so important. So they focus on just on literature. A very few number of
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة الرفيعة وابعثه اللهم المقام المحمود الذي وعدته وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
The joint cultural year. Now tell us more about this honoring.
Okay, I spent about 5 years actually trying to introduce modern names in contemporary Russian literature. You know, about in the 70s, there was some sort of sluggish movement of translation, especially contemporary names. Most of translations were focusing on classical names. They already known. So I tried hard to introduce these names to the reader, and then when Svetlana Alexievich won the Nobel Prize in 2015, I translated her book Chernobyl Prayer, and since then it's a bestseller. About 4 years now, it's a bestseller, and this actually gave a push to this actually gave a push to the readers to be actually encouraged to read about different names, and I try to give the committee that control the or manage the organization of the year so many ideas concerning trying to attract readers more to the modern literature and culture, and try as well to introduce Arabic names, Arabic contemporary names to Russian readers.
All right, Mr. Ahmed, what are the most prominent works that are present here in the Russian section at the Cairo International Book Fair?
You mean books?
Yes, the books. The
Actually, this year there are so many books introduced by either governmental publishing sections and private sector publishing houses, cultural palaces. They made about 20 new books in different fields, not only literature, and so many names now, contemporary Russian names are being translated. They translated Ludmila Ulitskaya, and this year there will be Zakhar Prilevin, Denis Gotsko, and Giselle Yakhina, this is Russian writer, and she's famous. She won the Booker Prize, and so many different writers actually.
Okay. Mr. Ahmed, what books did you translate and how do you choose the books that you want to translate?
Okay, I've translated so many Russian classical and modern works, um, including Chernobyl Prayer, including Lev Tolstoy, Father Sergei. I translated Without Way, Without Trace, Denis Gotsko, and I translated White Nights of Dostoevsky. I've translated the correspondence between Lev Tolstoy and Mahatma Gandhi. I introduced them in a book called State of Love, and so many short stories and essays.
Yes, sir, you must have been exposed to the Russian way of life. You know, having spent your entire career in, you know, in this field. So tell me, what are, in your view, the most common traits between the Egyptian and the Russian societies, and also the disparities, the obvious disparities in your view,
But actually, they would remain,
other than
they
being
would remain
family-oriented
impressions.
people? Because I know that the Russians, just like Egyptians, you know,
They would
cherish
remain,
family
they would
traditions.
remain. Actually, my kids are half Russian and half Egyptian.
Okay.
And they live now in Kazan. Kazan is one of
Yeah,
the
of
big
course.
cities. One of the big cities in.
There
in
was the
Russia.
Olympic Games there recently.
Yes.
I think the Winter
Yes.
Olympic Games
Yes.
in Kazan.
Not in Kazan. It was in
Sochi.
Sochi.
Sochi. But Kazan, yeah, another big city. Yeah, it must have had a big sporting event anyway.
Yes, but Kazan was one of the cities that hosted the World Cup.
Yes, yes, that's why.
World
That's
Cup.
why.
Yep.
Okay.
And I was there during the World Cup, and I made a book, and this book was it's not published yet. Interviews with the fans from everywhere in the world, and their impression about Russia and about the World Cup.
Wonderful.
And I would answer your question through their point of view.
Yes, please.
Because it was astonishing actually, and the idea of the book, it came just like that. I was walking down the street and close to the Kremlin, Red Square, and there was actually, it was a fan zone, and there were lots
Where they had
of people.
those big
Yes.
screens.
Lots of people, thousands of people, different
From all
colors
over the
and
world.
different. I was about to say it in Russia.
Say it in
different
Russian.
language.
No, say it. We want to listen.
Разные языки это different languages. And цветы разные, люди разные. Много народ.
You see, this sounds Russian.
So many,
Yes.
so many people. And then I met one Brazilian and one from Chile, and I asked them, what's your impression about Russia? They said, it's a fable.
It's
Fable. It's a myth. So it's a secret uncovered. You know, Putin himself.
in which language do you speak with the Brazilian and the Chilean?
English.
Yeah.
English is
Because
the
Brazilians
the
speak
solution.
Portuguese and Chileans speak Spanish.
English is the solution
Okay.
always. Actually, Putin himself said about the World Cup that it is some kind of public relation event. It was meant to eradicate the long established stereotypes. The people I've met, they were fascinated by the architecture, they fascinated by the beauty of the cities, fascinated the greenery, and about how friendly the Russians are. And this is actually was new to me. Because Russians, as I know, because first time I traveled to Russia was 2001, and they are totally different now. they are so friendly. They know different languages, and the organization was wonderful. The traffic was wonderful. Everything is organized. But actually, we cannot say the word Russian to include everyone who's living in Russia, because Russians are different. Some people from different origins and religions, ethnic groups, so they cannot be grouped into one group. But the purely Slaviani or Slavic Russians,
Yes.
Well, which,
different.
which Moscow is part of.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
definitely, it's a very interesting topic. The Egyptian Russian cultural ties, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to literary works and translation. I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Salah Eddin, translator and writer, for
Thank
being
you
with
very
us
much.
here on our cruise.
We
Thank you
wanted
very
to
much.
listen more. Really, we were enjoying, but unfortunately,
Thank you
Our
very
time
much.
for this
we
segment
have,
is
yeah.
up.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a short break and we'll be right back.